instructor for this course. This is Business 300, which is Organizational Development and Change. This here is our textbook, so hopefully you all have gotten a copy of this by now or started reading it online. But this will be the main text for the course in addition to anything else that I might post or things like that. However, I think it's a really good text for the course because it really looks at how you access change capacity within an organization. And I'm going to give you a little bit of my thoughts on why this course is important, why this text is important, and then how that all relates back to what we're going to be talking in the class and the assignments that you're going to be completing throughout the course. So let me start by telling you once again a little bit about my biography so that you kind of understand my background, and it'll shed some light on some of the examples that I'll share from my own career. So again, my day-to-day life, I'm a quality manager for a printing company in Connecticut. We specialize in printed electronics. So my job is pretty heavy on the analysis side of things, collecting data, statistics, that type of thing. But in addition to those responsibilities, I also manage several members of my team, including those that are involved in the manufacturing of our products and some of the office support that we have. In addition to the current managing responsibilities that I have, I also have served as a manager in my previous roles too. So that being said, I've been managing people for probably, I don't know, maybe about 15 years now. And it's been a really enlightening experience learning how to work with different types of people, learning how to help them develop and access all of the power that they have and the knowledge that they have and the value that they can bring to your organization. But all that being said, it's quite challenging to do so. I'm a firm believer, as is, I believe, the author of our text, that organizations are a lot more than just buildings and equipment and processes and systems and customers and all those types of things. What businesses are really about and what really makes them tick are the people that work for them. And without those people, and without being able to kind of unlock their potential and to manage them well and to kind of mitigate their weaknesses and help them build on their strengths, that's really what organizations are about, the people. In addition to the people, though, organizations are dynamic. They are not static. They're constantly changing, evolving. And there's a lot of factors for that. Sometimes it's based on your business needs. Other times it's based on the market and where the market happens to be going for whatever industry you happen to be in. Sometimes it's based around the customers that you get in the door and things that you need to change to meet their expectations and needs. That being said, organizations are constantly in a process of change. I've yet to work for one that wasn't constantly changing something, developing something new, and that fluidity and that ever-evolving nature of businesses leads to constant reevaluation of your team and needing to change and needing to understand who on your team are the players that you want to be involved in that, who are the players that you kind of have to be concerned about because they may not be as supportive of change as others on your team. And those types of things are really where the people and the change together is really the crux of this course. So we're going to learn how organizations develop over time, how they change, and how to assess the change capacity of the people that work on your team or for your organization, how to put together the best group of people to implement change, and how to kind of work around people that may be divisive to your change or sort of neutral on change. Change is actually really hard for a lot of people. I don't particularly struggle with change. And maybe that's because of just the varied background that I have. But that being said, a lot of people do. There's people on my current team that struggle with that. I'm actually going through a lot of change right now as an organization. And so actually this course is well timed for me in a lot of ways because I'm learning, as you guys are, how to unlock this potential of my team and how to reevaluate them. And I'm actually using some of the tools that are in our text. And so it's actually been pretty interesting for me, and it's also given me really relevant and timely experiences that I can draw on and share with you all. So let's talk about the text a little bit and the first few chapters that are the reading material for this week. The first thing, as we kind of talked about, is that everybody has this personal change capacity. And what that is really how well they handle change, how they cope with change, and how they sort of behave during that change, and whether it's constructive or destructive to the change that you're trying to implement. And for each person on your team, and that includes yourself, we each have a personal change capacity. And we need to understand that and sort of unlock that to know how to utilize the players that we have to the best of our ability to hopefully implement the change successfully. So a couple of things. This individual assessment is key. It really makes up the first few chapters of the text. So this first kind of step in evaluating and kind of evaluating your team, your text breaks it down into 5 different factors. Kind of the targeted skills that the project or whatever the change happens to be requires. The pivotal positions, which is which roles are critical for this. Towering strengths, which are the strengths of that particular team member. And as we know, everyone has strengths and weaknesses. We all do. And so we have to look, though, at who has the greatest strength in a given area. Next would be developmental needs. A lot of times, leaders are diamonds in the rough. They need development, and some people will have had that development and be at the stage where they're ready to lead a team through change or take a pivotal role within that. And others are going to require development, whether that be experiences that they haven't had, education that they haven't had, those types of things, training. And then last is kind of challenges and unanswered questions, things that you anticipate being challenging, as well as maybe some questions that you need answers to before you can make decisions about your team. So those 5 factors are kind of the first step in this making change process that your book introduces. The next step is really spotlighting kind of 2 key measures. How people, their response to change or their change response, and also looking at their versatility and assigning a versatility rating. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. The third step, which we also are reading covers for this week, is creating profiles. And that's based on the previous steps that we've gone through. And there's kind of different archetypes for these profiles, and people sort of fall within those. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The next few steps are things that we'll get into in the coming weeks. Identifying group change capacity. So not just individual capacity to change, but how your whole group sort of, the interactions between your people and who's strong and who has what weaknesses and those types of things, and understanding that. Analyzing your weak links is the next step, which is kind of looking at how do you sort of work through your weaknesses on your team and how do you strengthen your team in different areas. And then finally, how you draw the roadmap. So given all of the things that you've collected in the previous steps, what do you need to do to move toward effective change? And how do you set yourself up for success? And that's sort of what the introduction to your text goes through. So let's get into kind of the first couple of chapters of the text and sort of, I'll give you a little bit of commentary on what I think are the key points, as well as anything else that I think might be relevant to kind of share with you guys. So the first thing that you have to do in this process is to develop an evaluation team. This should be between 2 and 5 members. Sometimes this can be easier than other times. It depends on the nature of your team. But basically, what you're looking for is how do you put together the right team to assess the other members and to make recommendations for how you're going to put together this roadmap or this change plan that you have. So let's talk through kind of what Chapter 1 covers. Chapter 1 really goes through each of those 5 evaluation factors in some more detail. So again, we have the first factor is targeted skills. So you have a list of skills that are really necessary for whatever change you're trying to implement. The next is again those pivotal positions. So what key positions are going to make or break your effort? So for instance, if let's say the project was a technology-based project and you're implementing a new ERP system or something like that. Clearly, in those cases, like your IT folks or other technology resources on your team are going to be those pivotal positions that are needed based on the knowledge that they have. And so, like I said, depending on the project that you have, your pivotal positions are going to be different, as well as will be your targeted skills. So you could actually have somebody who's a key player in one change project, but maybe a more minor player or maybe even a resistant player in a different project, depending on the context. The next would be towering strengths. So you're going to look at each person and sort of say, what are the 1 to 3 different things that they really excel at? And each person has those, just like we all have probably a few strengths and a few weaknesses. And the purpose of this particular factor is to really look at those strengths. So like for instance, on the team that I have, my colleague, she's very strong at customer connections and in making sure that customers feel confident that they're going to get what they need on time. She's also very good at project management and time management. So if I was looking for a project that was involved or looking towards a change program that involved maybe something to do with customers, she would be a key asset to that team. But like I said in the previous example, like an ERP implementation program, she wouldn't be that pivotal player because that's not really her role, and neither is it her strengths. So let's look at the next factor, developmental needs. So these are needs that can be met within the reasonable time for them to actually benefit this particular change program. So sometimes people have developmental needs that are above and beyond the scope of what you're currently working on. Say your change program needs to be implemented in the next 3 months, and this person, in order for them to be a pivotal player, it requires that they take a class that takes 6 months to complete. Well, that time frame, although that developmental need, you still may want to develop that person. For the purposes of this project, it would be outside of the scope. And so sometimes when you look at the developmental needs, again, it's not just what the person needs, but also the time that you have available and whether you can make those things work. And the last thing would be challenges or unanswered questions. So, you may have, can this person do this? Will this person behave the way I expect them to and be that core team member that I need to accomplish my change? And so those types of questions you may have about certain individuals based on their previous performance, or maybe you just haven't seen them perform in this particular area, so you're not quite sure. You don't have that background or that previous experience to be able to draw on to say, yep, I kind of get a feel for how this person may react in this situation or those types of things. So that's kind of the basics of Chapter 1. I agree with the 5 factors that they're looking at. I do think that each of them is important, and looking at it in terms of a change program and looking at it from kind of a management perspective, I can understand why all of these factors would be considered for how you want to utilize the people you have. So Chapter 2 really gets into looking at 2 different key measures, and those key things are a person's change response as well as their versatility. So a couple of comments on this. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but basically what you're looking for here is how well do people respond to change? Are they an active responder in the sense that they're willing to take the risk and kind of jump in there and use their skills and to benefit the company? You also have passive responders, people who kind of go with the flow. I have one of those on my team. He's not the kind to typically, lead the battle. However, he is someone who typically will go with the flow. He won't resist the change, and once he kind of gets on board, he can be a key player on a team. You also have reactive responders. So these are people who you have to change by force. These are people who they may be initially resistant, but when push comes to shove and the change happens, they'll get on board, but they're a little bit more difficult to get on board than those that are passive responders and will go with the flow. And the last would be somebody who's actually a blocked responder, somebody who's going to go out of their way to really um, potentially, what's the word I want to use, be destructive towards whatever the change is. I also have one of these on my team, and from time to time, um, this person is not always a blocked responder. It depends on the subject matter. But for certain types of change that we've been going through on my team, this person has been resistant. And I've had to do quite a bit of coaching so that this person gets on board fast enough that they don't become actually kind of the anchor sinking the program. And so those types of people can be challenging to work through. For myself, I'm a relationship-oriented manager. The people who work for me know that I am invested in them personally, and so sometimes that helps me work through some of these very challenging situations with people because I can rely on that relationship with them to try to convince them that the change is worthwhile and to try to get them on board or minimally to get them not to disrupt the work that the other people on our team are doing or to be negative toward it. But again, that is challenging. One of the challenges with kind of figuring out somebody's change response is a lot of times people are sort of inconsistent. Depending on the type of change that you're trying to implement, what the subject matter is, their response might be different. And so you may have seen kind of this irregular sort of up and down response that they have. And so it can be kind of difficult to classify people for that reason. However, that being said, I think that there's ways to overcome that or ways to sort of test the waters if you have time and those types of things to be able to overcome it. But sometimes you might have to roll the dice and make an educated guess about how somebody's going to respond to change. And if they pleasantly surprise you and they respond to change better, maybe next time you give them a different role. And if they let you down and they don't respond to the way that you expect, or in the case of someone destructive, they do, you have to learn to manage through that and to work through it and to work with your team to kind of work through those challenges. And again, I do understand it from a practical perspective, being a manager on a daily basis, that some of these things are easier said than done. You know, in a book, it all looks pretty easy, but we all know in reality, dealing with real people's personalities, strengths, and weaknesses, that it's more complicated than that. So, again, change response can be difficult to predict. However, the better that you get at understanding your team, the better that you'll get at identifying their change response as well. Versatility ratings are another thing I kind of want to talk about. So what this gets into is the scale of what a person is able to take on, as well as the scope. So can the person take on more people, more departments, more responsibilities would be scale. So for instance, in my case, I manage 2 different groups of people. Now say my boss wanted to assign me another group of people, he would have to assess whether or not I'm able to commit to a greater scale. Additionally, there's also what we call scope. So scope would be, are people able to do things differently? Are they able to increase kind of what they're doing and the number of things that they're doing? So sometimes you have individuals that are clearly versatile. No matter what you throw at them, they're able to kind of roll with the punches, adapt. And you know, with those people, you would have to assess whether they're ready now, as in if the program started tomorrow and you had a change program, you could easily plug them in, or whether they're people who need to be developed a little bit, but in the future may be really versatile individuals for you. So again, when you look at in this versatility, and there's a number of different archetypes that they sort of go through in the text about people who are kind of expandable, versatile, whether you have somebody who's an irreplaceable pro on your team in the sense that they have one skill set that they're very good at, but depending on the project, they may be your critical player. All of those types of things are kind of what they're getting through in this chapter. And then you have the 3rd chapter. The 3rd chapter goes through some of the basic profiles about people, and they have some interesting little bios in there. So I recommend spending some time and reading through that section and trying to imagine people either in your own organizations or from your past experience that sort of fit each of those archetypes. These 3 chapters sort of set the stage for the larger context of the assignments that you guys have for the course. I posted a little bit about assignment number 1 last night, but I would also like to go into it in a little bit more detail here for you all. So what the purpose of the assignments are in this course is that you're going to select a business. This can either be a business that you know of, a business that you've worked at, a business that a friend works at, a parent, a colleague, a spouse, that type of thing. And you're going to look at basically their change capacity as an organization. So you need to have some access to this business. So please read through the rubrics that are available on Canvas that kind of go through the types of questions. But the reason I was trying to make the connection between the assignments and the text is they are very connected. We're going to be looking at in our text how to make change happen, and then through the assignments we're going to be looking at the tools that the author is introducing in your text and how do you apply them in the real life context. And I'm sort of going through that, as I said before, with my own organization at the moment, which has been very interesting. But I think that the project really is practical in the sense that it's not just theoretical and you guys writing papers and those types of things based on kind of fictitious examples, but it's meant to give a more practical component to the course. So please do look through the assignments, think through what organization makes sense for you and what organization you would have the ability to assess their change-making capabilities and those types of things. But I really think that the way that this course is structured, especially being that it's online, but it has this practical component, is really good. And I hope that you guys will find the assignments relevant to what you're doing and also connected to the course material. So please do read through the rubric, especially the one obviously for the assignment that's due this week for chapters that pair with chapters 1 through 3 of the textbook. But also looking forward at the other assignments that are coming up so that you kind of can prepare and understand what's sort of expected of you in the next few weeks. Given the condensed nature of this course, it's really easy for the assignments to sneak up on you. So please be sure to take a look at those. Thanks again. I hope this video was helpful, and I will be making another one next week. Please feel free to send me any kind of commentary you have on the videos, whether you like them, you don't, that type of thing. But hopefully they'll be helpful for you guys, and hopefully it wasn't too painful. This was my first video making experience. Oh, and that's my son in the background telling